I must admit, I believe I may have been wrong with some of my previous deductions regarding the roots of Sol-3 in my last videos. The ancient root system might not have spawned from the blood of the gods, as I suggested in my Luuk video, and the root system of Renacida may not have been diseased by the Threnodian parasitization in my Threnodian video. No, the roots of Sol-3 are probably working exactly as intended. But how can I be so sure of that now? It's all thanks to new revelations from the Royan Frostlands and Ichor, the blood of the gods. However, what is flowing through Luuk Herssen's veins may be even more ancient. These revelations have even led to an interesting theory regarding Aemeath. You might already have an inkling of what my revised root theory is based on the title and thumbnail. So let me walk you through my observations and reasoning. Let's return to the roots of Sol-3, these quiet, background support characters. Before I get into how Luuk and Ichor fit into my root theory, let's first recap what we already know and then refine it given the new root systems of the Royan Frostlands. My theory as it stood before version 3.1 was as follows. As discussed in previous videos, there are root structures scattered throughout Sol-3. These roots are slightly different from region to region, and so may come from different trees. These roots can also grow to immense size, as seen in the underground during Lingyang's companion quest. At first glance, most roots seem fairly normal, and blend into the background. However, when we add the variable of Threnodian contamination in Renacida, these roots take on a deep, starry blue glow, matching the color of Leviathan's contamination, such as seen in the Thessalio Fells and the border mountains of Septimon. In Jinzhou, however, areas of heavy Threnodian contamination are devoid of live roots. There was only a brief instance during the Dim Forest exploration quest where we saw potentially red glowing root-like structures, which would match the red contamination of the Norfall Barrens and port city of Guizhou. In contrast, in areas that experience sudden and extreme waveform phenomena wrought by the Threnodians, such as the Norfall Barrens and the wastelands of the Sanguis Plateau, all roots are calcified. Interestingly, the underground region of Lahairoi had a distinct lack of a natural root system, and unfortunately, the Bjorder Woods felt like there were too many additional variables introduced to tie those giant trees into my root theory at that time. From this evidence, and others I mentioned in previous videos, I posited the theory that the Threnodian Leviathan was incorporating into the root system to hijack it. The question then is, do the roots we see in version 3.1 further support, refute, or add new variables that will allow us to gain a broader or deeper understanding of what purpose these roots serve in Sol-3's lore and world building? First, I would like to lay out a few observations I have made as of version 3.1, and they are as follows. First, I would like to touch on the giant Bjorder roots I just mentioned. The Rebirth Uplands exploration report gives us a bit of insight, although it's tough to piece together due to the corrosion, and so we will reference what Luuk says in the second half of version 3.1, where he clarifies and summarizes this document fairly well. Near Bjorder Woods exists a giant Soliskin root network, which acts as a lid sealing the Strider Gate. This lid keeps the fractured Threnodian from reuniting and causing a world-ending catastrophe. The document then continues that this structure, or lid, is in equilibrium, a tug-of-war with whatever is on the other side, and receives a constant supply through its quote-unquote root-like structures. As this document is partially corrupted, and Luuk doesn't cover everything in the document, what I take this to mean is that the Exostrider made a Soliskin root network, mimicking the local root system, much like all of its other biomimicry, to absorb Threnodian frequencies and convert and then use that energy to power the lid. Hence the tug-of-war. If the root system could drain the Threnodian energy faster than Aleph-1 could continue absorbing new frequencies through void storms, then maybe it could be weakened. Now let's return to the live root systems of Sol-3, not made of Exostrider material, that we see in the Frostlands in version 3.1 that were missing in the lower level of Lahairoi. The first roots I encountered seemed to support the observation I previously established, that glowing roots exist in areas contaminated with Threnodian energy. The clearest example being Rover and Aemeath's old cabin, where the giant weeping Sakura sits atop Gunungamir. which is stated to have the highest concentration of void matter in the area. This tree is riddled with glowing, desaturated purple veins, much like those in Renacida, but matching the coloration of Aleph 1's void matter or void storms. This is consistent with the observation that glowing roots are seen in areas of Threnodian contamination, but not necessarily that the Threnodian is taking advantage of these roots per se, but rather that it is just being absorbed through it, like the Soliskin root network I just mentioned from Piotr Woods. Further exploration revealed something interesting not seen in previous regions. That is a second set of roots with different colors. The second set of roots appear crystallized or frozen and have a much more vibrant purple with pulsing periodic pink hues. These are seen down in the Uplaf life chamber. At first observation, I believe the second set of roots match the colors of Exostrider and Aemeath almost 1-to-1, although with a stronger bias towards pink. This is the same color we see pulsing through the ice and glaciers of the Frostlands, with the most clear example being the wave above where the Exostrator slumbers. However, this may be a red herring. Upon further analysis of past promotional material, the Exostrator is always light blue and gold, never purple or pink, except when Aemeath is executing an attack, but that's Aemeath's power, not the Exostrator. This is consistent with previous Sentinels we have seen, which all have strong blue and gold coloring, seen in both Jue and Imperator, even down to their blood. Similarly, components of the Exostrator, the Exoswarm, have similar light blue coloring. By this reasoning, I would have expected to see the structural Exostrator components scattered throughout La Haroi with the same colors. However, most are glowing pink and purple, like the crystallized roots seen in the Frostlands, and are likely due to the contamination by Aleph 1's frequencies. There are a few exceptions that do support the color scheme for the Exostrator, or Sentinels, being light blue though. For example, a few blocks at the Soliskin seed repository, and some random balls on the edge of the map that still maintain this light blue glow for some reason. The same light blue circuitry that we see is added to Aemeath's design after she resonates with the Exostrator. However, it is difficult to establish any pattern here for these structures, as there are no clear variables that predict where or when these structures take on their representative colors. Honestly, the number of blue structures are too few and interspersed. Finally, after completing the Royan Frostland exploration quest, you can uncover the bioprinter, a piece of the Exostrator that is printing a tree that has blue energy flowing through it, not pink, not purple, further supporting that the Exostrator's frequency color is blue, or light blue. This will be important for Luuk's Ichor theory in the latter half, so remember it. How then has the theory evolved, and what are further implications? These observations led me to assign purple to the Threnodian, pink to Aemeath, and light blue to the Exostrator or Sentinel analog, each with their own set of roots supporting these color assignments, although the Exostrator or Sentinel analog only has a single partially constructed tree to work with. This then suggests that these root systems may also remove residual energy from Sentinels or Sentinel resonators, along with Threnodians. This theory will be important for Luuk's Ichor theory in the latter half, so remember this as well. Now that we know Sentinels are foreign to Sol-3, I would not be surprised if these roots are indeed trying to remove all foreign or aberrant frequencies. This would also help explain the gold versus blue oak seen in the Renaissance weapon material domains that I could not rationalize in my previous root theory video. Perhaps the gold veins were from a time when Imperator was highly active. Extending this speculation even further, perhaps this is why Sentinels, as powerful as they are, now seem to leave the people of Sol-3 to fight their own battles, preferring to act as only guides and oracles, as the world itself rejects intervention by all foreign powers, just as Aemeath said. Honestly, it was very difficult to consistently assign these colors to their respective individuals, specifically because of the cinematic Me and You, where we see the Exostrator being restrained by Aleph 1 using straps of the same color scheme as the Aemeath Exostrator pair, pink and blue respectively, the same color scheme we see in the glaciers of the Royan Frostlands. We then also see this color scheme in the excretion disk of Aleph 1, doubling down on this frequency pair seeming to have some relationship to Aleph 1, instead of the expected deep purple of void matter. This then begins to support an alternate theory for where the pink roots may come from. In the Rebirth Uplands exploration report, the Threnodian, Aleph 1, is described to have a dual source frequency. One frequency is attributed to the areas experiencing periodic void storms, and I believe would account for the deep purple-colored roots. The question then is, what frequency accounts for the pink pulsing roots? This second frequency is described to be sealed underneath Sundamir Lakebed, and may be why we only see this color frequency in old crystallized roots, as it should have been sealed when these roots were first crystallized, as read in the description of Jade Wood, seen on screen now. However, looking at the base of the Exostratus Greatsword, it almost seems like this frequency color is leaking out, almost as if the lid had been damaged and the frequency is slowly leaking. Why does Aleph 1 have a dual frequency in the first place, though? Is Aleph 1 capable of using frequencies it has consumed, and thus has a rainbow frequency color spectrum, or is Aemeath's strong pink frequency now part of Aleph 1? I did always find it odd that Aemeath explained away her immunity to the deleterious effects of void space with something as simple as being a digital ghost. How is that supposed to explain it? Why else would void space not hurt her, except if she was part of it? After all, if you analyze Aemeath's name in Hebrew, Aemeath, and you remove her figurative corpse, the last two letters, meth, then you're just left with Aleph. If Aemeath, or a corrupted version of Aemeath, is part of the Threnodian Aleph, or technically always was, then that could explain why Aleph 1 is stated to have a dual source frequency, and why Aemeath's color frequency is coming from behind the Strider Gate, as she was trapped there at the end of her story. This then may also explain why we see her frequency being absorbed in these second set of roots, because the roots recognize it as an aberrant, contaminating, Threnodian-like frequency. That, or her frequency was just co-absorbed because she clashed with the Threnodian when these particular roots were crystallized. Before moving on, I would like to acknowledge that due to apparent inconsistencies in the game, there are a couple root placements that I feel off about, such as how the crystallized roots at the end of the Uplaf life chamber are mixed in with quote-unquote live roots. Shouldn't all these deep roots be crystallized, with only those in the illusion range appearing alive and uncrystallized? Feel free to let me know your theories below, or if you also think this might just be an inconsistency. To summarize my refined theory, the presence of these glowing roots in areas of strong Threnodian and or Sentinel contamination leads me to believe that these roots are actually attempting to cleanse their locales of strong or aberrant frequencies. This is a somewhat straightforward post-apocalyptic trope where nature takes over and purifies a polluted world, such as is shown in Studio Ghibli's film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. These massive tree and root systems likely function as a purifying world tree, akin to Norse mythology's Yggdrasil. Going back to the tree seen above Rover's cabin, it is likely not a coincidence that this quote-unquote world tree is situated in Gununga Mere, the Yawning Lake, which is probably an allusion to one of Yggdrasil's roots being situated where Gununga Gap, the Yawning Void, was, especially when Aleph 1, who is the source of void matter, represents a void. Something that comes out of this theory then may be that where there are visible glowing roots, so too is there an active Threnodian, strong enough to continually contaminate the local environment in a tug of war against the root's purification strength. Considering this, I have gained a newfound respect for Geshu Lin, a man who, despite being just a man, stood up to the collective hate and discord manifested in the overwhelming power of the Threnodian Ovathrax. With sheer tenacity and will, he dealt a grievous wound to an immortal being, enough to make it hibernate for years to come, and he did so in the final moments all alone, leaving the local root system to clear out the Threnodian energy from the environment unobstructed. Speaking of clearing out Threnodian energy, there exists another stage these roots are often seen in, that being ravaged by mushrooms or large blooming fungi. We see this famously in the dim forest before it is restored. We also see it several times in Septimont, and most recently at the end of the Uplaf life chamber. These mushrooms share an uncanny resemblance to Hymenoscyphus fraxineus, a parasitic fungus that is currently ravaging the ash trees of our real world. Coincidentally, Yggdrasil is an ash tree, or a fraxinus in Latin, and thus we may postulate that when these trees do sustain prolonged damage, the fungus kills the root and flower, and may be another allusion to these trees serving as a world tree. Wait, fraxinus? Fraxidus? Nah, that probably is just a coincidence, as if you break fraxidus into Latin roots, it means something closer to broken constellation or star, and these are much closer to direct translation from Chinese being disabled star society. Anyway, now that we have established that the root systems are an extensive presence across all of Sol-3, and may allude to a world tree that filters the residual energy of Threnodians and potentially Sentinels, what does this have to do with Luuk and Iker? And why would Threnodian-loving Fraxidus be interested in Iker in the first place? Well, the answer to this question is short and sweet. Maple syrup. Yep, Navial has been tapping a world tree and condensing its sap into Yggdrasil syrup, marketed as Iker, or so my theory goes. Now, while I do not like to use too many external sources to infer in-game lore, because I am not very knowledgeable in mythology, and I like to just recognize patterns in-game, what I will acknowledge is that from the games and media I have consumed, I have seen that world tree sap is commonly used as a miracle medicine. For instance, in Valheim, an exceptionally good game, and a Norse mythology-inspired game, the description of sap obtained from ancient roots reads, "Sacred blood from the great tree." In Magic the Gathering, sap of the world tree is used to make Tyrite, which in turn is then used to make Cosmos Elixir. The description of this elixir reads, "The Skadi owe their immortality to the elixir, and the manner of its creation is their most closely guarded secret." Even in solo leveling, where we don't reference sap directly, even the leaves of the world tree are used in miracle potions. It would then track for in Wuthering Waves world tree sap to be a potential source for the miracle drug Iker, especially considering that tree sap is like a tree's blood, and Iker is considered the blood of the gods, or in this case, the blood of a tree god, something potentially even more ancient to Sol-3 than the Threnodians and Sentinels, what many may consider as the gods of Solaris. What would you think would happen then if this miracle sap was infused with Threnodian or Sentinel energy? If my theory is correct, that these roots are roots of world trees that are taking up residual Threnodian energy, then that would mean the trees are condensing Threnodian energy and infusing it into their sap. I imagine the new mentioned Fraxidus members, Hydra and Siren, are likely working to find a way to further condense that sap and inject that world tree syrup straight into their followers' veins, just as was done to Luuk. Why else would the Fraxidus have been funding the Iker project except for a potential connection to harnessing Threnodian's power? From what I could find in Luuk's examination report, we do not know what waveform Luuk resonates with. However, he has told us himself that he resonates with Iker. Something I find interesting then is Luuk's rare dual scheme, gold with light blue, almost clear liquid-like color, like maple sap. This almost makes me think he technically resonates with two things. If we continue with this line of logic, this is made very apparent in his combat showcase, when his resonance liberation goes off, clearly delineating the difference between these two. This makes me believe that either one, Luuk actually has resonated with two things, or this makes me believe that Luuk's body is infused with a less lethal form of the world tree sap that is clear or blue until it is activated and further condensed, or I should say filtered into pure form through his diffraction spectro forte to isolate the pure Iker frequency. If light blue is associated with Sentinels, as proposed in the previous section, then perhaps Luuk's coloration implies that this Iker is infused with Sentinel energy. Returning to Luuk's original teaser, this then means that the Iker is not the source of the massive tree he sits on. Rather, the tree he sits on is the source of the Iker inside him, so named because of the shared appearance with the mythological blood of the gods and Prometheus. However, I could be wrong here. Perhaps the cycle has no beginning. Before closing out, I wanted to bring up something interesting I noticed while looking through material for evidence. In my previous root theory video, I proposed that these roots may be connected to the Somme Noir, the realm of dreams. Seeing as the roots that I believe may contain some of Aemeath's resonance energy are crystallized, it gave a whole new meaning to the following lines from Snowfluff's Voyaging Stars Farewell. May your path be clear, may you get to where dreams are all crystalline and sweet. Where dreams are crystalline? Can the Somme Noir be crystallized in these crystal roots? As I close out, let us recap this all together. The summary of my theory is as follows. First, each region has a world tree, like Yggdrasil, but on a regional level, with its own expansive root systems. Second, these roots constantly purify their locales, taking up residual Threnodian or sentinel energy. Third, if excessive waveworm phenomenon are wrought on an area, these roots are calcified. Fourth, through extensive exposure to Threnodian and maybe sentinel power, these roots decay and are overtaken by fungus. Fifth, ichor comes from the sap of the world tree roots. Sixth, and finally, the Frostlands were interested in ichor because the sap has the potential to be made with concentrated Threnodian energy. Seeing as the Frostlands have a large presence in the New Federation, I would not be surprised if the Threnodian is very active there, giving ample contaminated roots to refine ichor from. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Frostlands somehow have exploited the Sentinel as well, since my theorized Sentinel color scheme fits Luuk's ichor colors better than a potential Threnodian colorization. All of these theories, though, rely on Kuro games being consistent with their imagery and symbology, down to the smallest detail. I can only hope that these patterns I have identified are a purposeful representation of deeper lore that we have yet to explore in the main game. But that is all for the theories I have right now. As always, please keep those cores fed and stable.